Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Gerard.
Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, and today my special guest is Patrick Connors. Patrick's first chapbook, Scarborough Songs, was released by Lyricalmyrical Press in 2013 and charted on the Toronto Poetry Map. He contributed 18 poems to Bottom of the Wine Jar, published in 2017 by SandCrab Press and launched in Gibara, Cuba. He has performed at the Austin International Poetry Festival, featured in numerous reading series such as the Art Bar, Wild Writers, and Plasticine Poetry. And he's also hosted events under the 100,000 Poets for Change banner, as well as the United May Day Committee, and was on the organizing committee for the Great Canadian PoeTrain Tour. His first full collection, The Other Life, was released in 2021 by Mosaic Press. His most recent chapbook, Worth the Wait, was released in 2023 by Cactus Press. And his latest collection, The Long Defeat, is newly released by Mosaic Press. So welcome, Patrick.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm honored to have this opportunity and very grateful. Having a membership with the CAA is something, but also the great support that we get from the organization for our artwork and for our efforts is very welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Now, tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up and how you started writing.
I grew up in Scarborough in a very working class neighborhood. I was always interested in writing and just naturally gravitated towards short stories and poetry. I didn't really realize I was a poet until I don't know, I guess my 20s, but I had already been writing poetry before that, and uh, and it's very much an expression of who I am. And what I want to do is I want to not just be able to write for the academic crowd. Certainly, if the academic crowd appreciate what I'm doing, fantastic. But I want people like everyday guys to say, you know, I don't really love poetry, but I don't hate what you did, and to get something out of it as well. And I've had that experience a number of times, and that's why I do what I do.
So, what are some of the themes or things that you like writing about?
The big things: love, religion, angst about the state of the world in terms of social justice, ecological problems, the climate, and where do we go from here?
Now, your latest collection, The Long Defeat, like, is there a theme running in the poems?
The We have been through a lot, and I want to add my voice. I don't want to have too much of a canon of pandemic poems, although there are a number of pandemic poems. But it's not just the pandemic. It's like the whole world has been in a place where it's like we've had to do more with less, and there's been less to believe in and less to look up to, and there's been a feeling of being defeated. But the purpose of this book is there's a lot of difficult poems in it, stemming from a lot of personal growth. But the theme is that the long defeat precedes great victory.
Now, you said you were writing short fiction before, so are you still doing that?
I have written a few short stories in the last 10 or 15 years, but it's mostly been poetry as per having had a couple of books come out. And I just find myself it's easier to focus on poetry because you can get in and out of the theme. I mean, it takes me 2 or 3 weeks to write a poem, but you can get in and get out of it and then move on. And then there's so many different ways that you can get it out there. You can read it on open mics. You can submit it. There's so many different things that you can do with poetry, and there's not as much that you can do with short fiction, which is a shame.
Okay, okay. So, what's the favorite thing you like writing about?
All of those things: love, religion, politics, social action, but also everyday things like sports. Get together with the guys and watching a game. I've written poems about that. Music, very guy music like Rush and things like that, but also great classical music and great jazz music. Just things that really move me and really engage me.
So for people who don't write poetry, like how would you encourage them to start?
Absolutely, that's a really good question. People feel like they have to learn a certain set of rules, and there's no question that you're not going to go as far as you can without learning what has been done before us and reading a lot of poetry and a lot of different types of poetry, contemporary and going long ago. But the thing is just be yourself. It took me a long time to really feel like I was being myself on the page, and I think I've finally got it down pat, pardon the expression, with the new book, and it's very genuine and it's very clear as a result.
And now when I was reading your bio, there's something called a Toronto poetry map. Is that
Yes, so,
put
when George
together?
Eliot Clark was the poet laureate of the city of Toronto, he said that we need to have a poetry map of poems from all over Toronto, and I had a poem that was representing Scarborough, in particular, my old watering hole in Scarborough from about 30 years ago. There's a poem in my first book about that. This was before I got to know George, so, I feel like you know I feel like I won him over, but that I also got in there on merit. And then, certainly since then we have become friends.
Cool. And then your other book, like it launched in Cuba. What was that about?
So I am involved with a group called the CCLA, which now stands for Canada Caribbean Literary Alliance. At the time, it was Canada Cuba Literary Alliance. Uh, Although the claim is that it tries to be as unpolitical as possible, everything is political. There has always been a strong tie between Canada and Cuba, and I've always had great love and affection and respect and concern for the people of Cuba. And it was just natural for me to get involved. I've been involved in a lot of different political poetry things, and that led me to getting involved in the CCLA. And then finally, I was invited in 2016 to submit some poetry for the bottom of the wine jar. Which came out as part of their Bridges series, and it was launched in Cuba, and I got to be in the real Cuba and in people's homes and in the real Cubana restaurants where Cuban people eat, not like resort type of thing. And it was a beautiful experience that I'll always treasure.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've never been to Cuba, so I'm quite curious. So yeah, cool. And you've been in so many reading series. Like I know whenever like Canadian Authors Association (CAA) has a reading, you always put up your hand. Like it's like I don't know. You love performing, I'm guessing.
I love reading and I love being part of community. And, if it gives me an opportunity to dust off a couple of old poems, great. But of course, situations like that are the perfect time to try and debut new work. What I'm really dying to do is to have in-person poetry readings because of my busy schedule. You folks have been having some in-person open mics, and I have not been able to make any of them yet. I'm really, really wanting to be a part of that and see some of you folks I've only met in 2 dimensions. I want to
Yeah.
actually see that you're three-dimensional and meet you in person, and really hoping to have that community advance that way.
Now, I know there's some people that want to do open mics, but they're scared. Like, do you have any good advice for people who've never done readings?
Absolutely. When you're always going to be nervous. I mean, if you go to a poetry reading, you go to an open mic, whether you've been doing readings for 5 minutes or for 20 years, if you're not nervous, if you're not doubtful, if you're not concerned about how you're coming across as an artist, and in terms of if you've got a personal message to get out, I'm very, very much a confessional poet, then you're in the wrong place. Because I mean, you're going to be nervous. There is going to be that scary moment, but it's exciting, and live off of that excitement. Do not expect to be perfect. The only person you have to be better than is yourself. And if you grow and you become a little bit better of a reader just about every time you do it, then you're just going to love it so much, and it's gonna lead you to a whole new group of people that to add to what you already have in your own life.
What do you think makes a good reading?
A good reading is one where I'm not too nervous and I'm not reading too fast, and my S's aren't slurring too much. And I'm making sure to be as engaged with the audience as possible. Eye contact is really good. Less easy to do with the open mic, but I know how to use my voice to sort of make connections with people, and and just if I get the feeling that I've touched even one person with one of my poems, then I feel really good about what I've done that day.
Now, you're a very busy person, so when do you find time to write? Do you have, like, a habit, like, you wake up and you do it, or
Well, this is the thing, because being a poet means a lot of different things. There is the dreaming stage of writing poetry, and then there's the actual sitting down and writing poems, and then I'll get two or three out there in like 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and then there's the editing, which is so important, which is also usually part of that. But the last poem of this book took me 3 months to write, and then yeah, you got to get out there, you got to sell yourself, you got to get yourself in literary magazines or grassroots magazines or what have you, and then you got to get your book to a publisher, and then you're going to have to make more adjustments to that. It's like six things in one, and I know people that are really gifted and super able to do all of those things at once and balance a family life and a personal life and a day job. I'm not one of those people when it comes to poetry. Like, I can be the poetry salesman at times. I can be the guy that hosts poetry readings at times, and I could be the guy working on my poetry. But I kind of hard for me to do all of these things at the same time. I tend to do these in cycles that are not necessarily determined by myself, but fortunately, I'm usually in a good place to create when I have the opportunity to create.
cool. Like, do you have any, poetry that you recommend to people?
Oh, boy, there's so much great poetry out there. My favorite poet is Robert Priest. I think that Robert Priest is incredibly accessible, but also a brilliant use of language and a musicality to it. And like he's like one of the few people that I could actually like want to listen to for longer than 20 minutes, because I mean that's usually how long poetry readings are, is like 15 or 20 minutes. He's like somebody that I love to listen to for like 30 minutes or longer. There's so many great poets out there. I'm honored to know some of the really special poets out there, and different sides of the field, right? Like, you get somebody like Albert Moritz, who's an incredible literary poet from an academic background, but then you also get somebody like Dane Swan, who comes at it more from an urban hip hop background, but also is very learned and a very accomplished man of letters himself. But it's got so many people out there that do it in a different way, but it all brings it together into communication, into community, and it's just such a wonderful thing when that happens.
Well, I think it's very wonderful that, like, you're so invested in community because I think one person told me at the time when I was telling them how much volunteer work I do, they were like, "Oh, but writers are selfish people." And I said, "Well, that's not true." And I
I mean,
think
somebody like you and some of the other people we know in the Canadian Authors Association give so much of their time selflessly. And I also look at Bunny Iskov of the Ontario Poetry Society, Jivan Bhagwat and Anna Neiman of the Scarborough Poetry Club. They do much just like yourself. They do much more for other people than they do for themselves or have other people do for them. And I mean, it usually will pay off. I mean, I can personally tell you that I've had some of my greatest personal success come about as a result of working with other organizations, helping out other people, that type of thing, and then other things have come out of that. But yeah, no, I mean, there is a time when you've got to be selfish about your time and make it that investment in your art. But I think by and large, the vast majority of the people I know are do far more for other people and do far more for poetry as an art form than they do for themselves.
Well, yeah, I totally agree. Like, I think a lot of opportunities come when you invest, when you're helping other people, they will help you as well. I like to think about it that way. Okay, Patrick, so you're going to do a reading for us. Can you tell us which book it's from and give us a bit of context before you start? Oh, the
The Long
latest one.
Defeat is my second collection, released by Mosaic Press, long renowned Canadian publisher. It was released this spring in time for National Poetry Month, which is something that both sides worked very hard for, and I'm very grateful for that, that they were accommodating in that regard. A lot of the poetry in here certainly is about things about where we were in 2020 and that type of thing. But I also feel that there was a timeliness to the message that made it need to come out right now. The first poem, sort of the title poem, I guess you might say, is called The Long Defeat That Brings Us What We Know. It's a line from the poem Neruda the Wine by the brilliant Muriel Rukeyser. I was doing even more reading than usual during the pandemic, and I read that poem Neruda the Wine, and right in the middle of the poem is the line "The long defeat that brings us what we know," and it's just like, my brain exploded, and I had to write this poem. He loves the beach. He walks barefoot along the shoreline, as close to the water without getting wet, while as far away from people as possible. Like every man, he experiences loss, failure, isolation, accusations, numerous as the grains of sand between his burning toes. The beach is where he finds peace. It is his favorite place to pray to the one who formed this beauty as a gift to all who would receive it. He prays for the world which once again suffers so much. He prays it will not be swept away by rising tides of hatred. He prays for his family. He prays for his friends. He prays for his enemies. He prays to be able to tell the difference. He rests at the end of a concrete pier. I have not been overcome, he proclaims to the setting sun, and that will have to do for now. So, a dear friend of mine, Opuck, was what he was known by, a First Nations leader, and he would bless the readings that I performed at and also that I hosted. He didn't really like the land acknowledgement. He found that it was reconciliation without having the discussion that was necessary for it, and it was misappropriation by colonialism again. So he would come and he would tell a story, or he would read a poem, or just say what was on his mind, and that was how he would open our events. And then on the first day of spring in 2020, he passed away, and this inspired this poem, A Period of Transition. March 21st, the first full day of spring. Birds are chirping, the sun shines, leaves are forming on the trees. Today is the day Opuck has left this dimension, and yet I know his spirit lives on. He taught us in 2012 that the end of the Mayan calendar was not the end of the world, but merely a new beginning. The universe is in a period of transition, Opuck said. All the stars and planets are in perfect alignment. It has taken us over 5,000 years to get to this point, but make no mistake, our time has come. If you are not ready for our destiny, the world will leave you behind. But if you will accept this new dawning, the importance of Mother Earth, the sacredness of all people, then you are ready for the days which will change the world forever. I know I will see Opuck again after I have made my period of transition. We will laugh and hug, and he will tell a joke about an angel, a poet, and the eagle. And we will laugh again, and he will teach me how to live in a world beyond enlightenment. So, of course, when Opuck passed, that was the very beginning of the pandemic, and it was kind of impossible to not write poetry in 2020, 21, or 22 without COVID being a theme. I wrote this while I was on lockdown when I was laid off for 10 weeks very shortly after that. Hemispheres. My introvert side is glad to actually have a rest. Breathes, exhales slowly, sinks into his chair. He sets priorities, contemplates, makes plans, yet accepts the folly of making plans, releasing all to its fulfillment. My extrovert side wants to eat sushi, drink draft beer, experience the world beyond his front door. He cannot bear to stay inside while there is an outside which must be changed. In the distance, a siren sounds, a call to action right now. It doesn't matter which side of my brain I would like to follow. At least I have passed 5 minutes of the pandemic. What I'm trying to do is by telling my own story, I'm trying to express something that's universal and that I hope that people can relate to. Because I mean, we all went through this. We were all on lockdown and we didn't know how to live our lives and what we were supposed to do. All I have to do is write. Hemingway was overcome by his need to be a metaphor for manhood. Sylvia Plath endured misery, depression, and Ted Hughes until she could no more. Dylan Thomas raged, debauched, and womanized until his light died. Szymborska told us about having to clean up after war. John McCrae wrote Canada's greatest poem during World War I. Joy Harjo became American Poet Laureate, describing the fallout of the war they wage on her own people. We are all at war on many fronts, some of it in the where we are, some of it unresolved battles from years gone by. Some of these wars we fight alone, others in solidarity with a found community. Sometimes it feels all is lost, but this usually precedes victory. I am blessed and honored to share my words, to be part of an ongoing dialogue, to try and make sense of the stuff of our lives. Now, because I do a lot of readings, when I get to the point where I'm putting a book together, I'm starting to think about poems that are appropriate to end readings with. And this was actually the last. So what I try to do is I try to have complex thoughts seem written as simply as possible while still being poetic and melodic. And it actually took me 3 months to get this poem right. And this was the last poem that I wrote for this book, A Matter of Faith. The epigraph for it is from Job chapter 6, verse 11. What strength do I have left that I should wait and hope? And what is ahead of me that I should be patient and endure? The world resumes their never-ending wars without a plan for peaceful resolution. And our city is a bastion of the entitled who use othering as their cause and their weapon. Compared to those in the line of fire, you realize how little your problems are, even though you are overwhelmed by them. But what if the battle is being waged by forces beyond what you can see? Long suffering is when such forces strive to kill the light and you choose to stand firm. This is the struggle to overcome despair. It requires in its infinite inner strength and infinite joy and faith in the glory of the light. So thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I hope that anybody who's listening to my words is inspired by them to create something of their own, whether it's a piece of art or how they live their lives with their family or with their job or anything else. And then we can all have solidarity in that found community with each other and help make the world a better place.
Well, thank you very much, Pat. I mean, I was very touched by your poem about the transformation and meeting your friend again one day. So.
Thank you. I
Well,
usually cry when I read that poem.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you very much once again for sharing your work with us. For more upcoming episodes of the Artsy Raven about writing and publishing, visit us at jfgarrard.com/arpodcast. A reminder to Patreon subscribers that there is bonus content available for every episode on the Patreon website. If you enjoyed the show, you can show your appreciation by buying us some digital coffee. The Artsy Raven is produced by J.F. Gerard. The voice in the show's introduction is Chris Gorman, and music is by Tim Moore. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe.